Yeah, wow. Well, I haven't heard that intro for a long while. Hey guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, and we're here for a very special one-off show to take a look at the transformation of Welsh football. If you're new here and you prefer your podcast in audio form, all of the shows which we produce are available at the Sports Social Podcast Network under their separate titles and stuff. So do check them out. We have a regular football show every Thursday, Rhodri Giggs on football, plus MMA and boxing show every Sunday. And plenty of other shows, including My Story, where we talk to different guests from different walks of life and let them tell their story. And tomorrow we are joined by Welsh rapper and mindset coach Jay Speaks as he tells his story, which is a very interesting episode and did not go the way I thought it was going to go. But nevertheless, it was a lot of fun. And I appreciate him traveling down from somewhere up west. But anyway, I'm delighted to be joined once again. It's been a while since we've seen him on the channel, but I see him quite a lot. But I'm delighted to welcome back Eat Sleep Media Creative Director, Welsh football fans host, and of course TalkSPORTs Welsh Football correspondent, Laurence Mora. Welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Oh, mate, I'm really pleased to be back. And given all those big names you had on the intro, a bit of a letdown, really, aren't I?
I think you were on there as well somewhere, weren't you?
Oh, was I?
I'm sure you're on there somewhere. I'm sure you're on there somewhere. Yeah, you definitely came on. But no, it was. I do miss those shows, those Monday nights with Andy, and just having like a different guest roll in each week. That was a lot of fun, but man's got to go and manage a football team. What can you do when he's doing very, very well?
Is he doing well up there?
Yeah, they had a good season. They stayed up last year, and they are looking for new players and stuff now. So I think,
Oh, he's a top bloke, Andy, isn't he? Top bloke.
But
we're talking Welsh football, mate. Why would I not want to be here for Welsh football chat?
Exactly that, mate. And I thought, I wanted to do this show as soon as Wales qualified for the World Cup. I was like, I want to do something. I want to talk about Welsh football, but I want to talk about how it went from very, very bad to very, very good. It didn't happen overnight. It took time. There was a lot of people involved. I think there's a few people who don't get enough credit, and I would also include the most recent outgoing manager in that as well. But we will discuss all of this, and I thought, who would be the best person to discuss it with, and who would have the most knowledge? I phoned them; they weren't available, so I came to you next.
Very good, very good.
Really good. I thought that on the fly as well. I thought that was quite good. So look at that straight away. Gaz in the chat, West Ham fan, says, "I just came for the channel, lads. Show some support. I'm not sure I can last a full show talking about Wales with you lot." Well, appreciate you guys. Appreciate the sentiment, if nothing else. But what I would like to do before we kind of delve into it is if anyone's got any questions, if anyone's got particular moments which they want to talk about or focus, or when they think things changed, or maybe some of your worst moments as a Welsh football fan, get involved, drop them in the chat. And of course, spread the words, tell your friends, all that good stuff as always. So obviously we could go back a long time with all the different close failures. The Bodin penalty miss is the obvious one. I don't quite want to go back sort of that far. I kind of want to start around about the sort of the playoff under Mark Hughes for, I think it was Portugal 2004, wasn't it? And that wasn't without its controversy, even that in the two-legged playoff. A Russian player, whose name I'm about to butcher, Yigai Titov, tested positive for a banned substance after the first leg, which was 0-0. But however, FIFA took no action against the Russian FA, other than telling him that he wasn't to play in the second leg. Russia went on to win 1-0 in Cardiff. The thing which always sticks out for me with that is that Robert Earnshaw was in the form of his life that season. I think he'd scored a lot of goals. I'm sure that was the season he'd scored like 25, 30 goals. And he spent his second leg in Cardiff. I think he spent most of it out on the right wing. And it felt very much to me, at least, and I'm going off, memory. We're talking sort of 20 plus years ago. Well, 20 years ago, just about, isn't it? I just remember feeling really frustrated with that particular instance because I felt like we could have beaten Russia and they got the tactics wrong and it was all a bit.
Definitely. I think you could definitely argue the poor selection of Hughes. He went a little bit defensive. I remember hearing when Ryan Giggs, and I'm sure we'll come on to chat about him, but I remember him talking about it in his very early days as Wales manager, and he was saying, the team we had 11 or 12 really. That was our squad, and beyond that, we had players that we would get in if we would desperately needed them to plug a gap. Really, it wasn't like it is now, where you can swap sort of 4 or 5 players in and out, and you've got a squad there. And he talked about the second leg against Russia, that the tiredness had crept into the legs, and that you couldn't quite get out of it what they put in the first leg. I mean, that might be because the Russians had some other things in their bodies which was helping them run faster and longer and recover quicker.
Yes, indeed.
But at the same time, it did feel like that. It felt like it was a game too far for the boys, and I don't just had Hartson kind of up there on his own, and he was toiling away, and we didn't get enough support into him, and we didn't get Giggs on the ball enough, and it was all such a disappointment when it knocked us back many years, but then potentially could have been seen as actually one of the best things to happen for Welsh football, given what happened over the next 10 years.
It was almost the catalyst, wasn't it, for the change, I suppose, because I think we're going into those Russian games, the playoffs. I think whilst we were fairly confident, and I wouldn't say we thought we were going to win, but I think we felt like over 2 games we could beat Russia.
I think after we got the goalless draw, I was thinking, we'll get them home. This is ours. This is our moment,
And you mentioned we had 12 players, and then you were looking outside of those sort of 11 or 12. You were looking into the League One, League Two, sometimes lower. But what I would say is that team also had some exceptional footballers in it, and probably should have maybe done better. But like you say, there's lots of things which go into it. It wasn't too long. I think we followed that up with a World Cup qualification, which wasn't particularly tidy, and then Mark Hughes left his role, and so I remember obviously when John Toshak became the Welsh manager again. And obviously, a lot about John Toshak, having just produced a film on him, which we'll definitely talk about that, I'm sure. But when he first became the Wales manager again, and you are sort of, I've skipped on a bit of time. I remember being quite disappointed. I felt like it was a bit of a backward step. And I specifically remember using the term, it's jobs for the boys. It's the same kind of rotation of the same types of managers, and I remember being very frustrated by it. But actually, when I sort of when I got Jamie to do the artwork for the show, I sort of said from Speed to the World Cup, And it was when I had a conversation with you after a couple of days later that it was John Toshak which started that transformation, because he abandoned maybe results as such, with the feeling that we're going to put these youngsters in, and a lot, they were very young players. We're going to put a lot of them in. They won't necessarily do fantastic now, but in 10 years' time, we're going to reap the benefits of it. And that was a brave decision, because not, management, you haven't got that time, have you? Like, it's results. And if you don't get the results, you're gone. And I think when you look back at it, and it's easy with hindsight, perhaps, but I do think that it was a brave decision for him to do that.
Yeah,
and obviously Brian Flynn as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Flinney, I think, played a huge role in it, and those two together, they just said enough's enough. Really, we need to sweep it out. But don't forget that I will give Toshak lots of credit. Probably more so than he's had in the past, and I think as time's gone by, those horrible memories of those games disappears somewhat, given the success we've had, and therefore you can look at it a little bit more objectively. But in the moment when Toshak was taking over, and the likes of Robbie Savage, Speed as well, Pembridge, Melville, they went, we're done with international football, and they walked, and you're like, oh shit, hang on a second. What have we got here? And it's all, I can remember the big Barney on TalkSport, on the Real Radio, if you remember Real Radio back in the day, when Leighton James and Robbie Savage went toe to toe, or down the line, as they were as James was saying, "Wow, you can't walk out on Wales. What are you walking out on Wales for?" Toshak knows where I am. Tell him to call me. Oh, he's got to call you. It was the most brilliant. I mean, go and look it up on YouTube if anybody has not heard it. It is a sensational bit of radio. I think you just need to type in Savage and Leighton James Real Radio phone in, and it's absolutely brilliant. But it really sums up kind of where we were at with that side. We just didn't have, the older players didn't want to play for Tosh, and that's the brutal truth. So in a way, his hand was forced with playing the youngsters. On the flip side of that, it was a very conscious decision. He wasn't asked if the seniors weren't there for the ride. What he wanted was people who would buy into him transforming this team and allowing the younger players full of talent. They looked at that side that that we had around about that time in that under 21 side, and we're like, got some players here, Bale and Ramsey, and Vokes was coming through with the 21s. Ledley was coming through. Of course, you can go on and list that team that did so brilliantly in 2016, and there they were, and Brian Flynn was just molding them into 21s, while Tosh was kind of getting results at the road, throwing him into the deep end. And it was a conveyor belt through of talent that was coming into the 21s, and Flinney was pushing them up one by one. And you could see it. You could see kind of what he was doing in retrospect, but living through it was bloody awful. I mean, I can remember, painful. Do you remember those crowds we used to get at the Millennium Stadium? It was called the Millennium, wasn't it then? It was awful, absolutely awful, and just so depressing. I remember going there and thinking, there was a side that Bellamy was playing and Giggs was playing, and it was a good. You go, God, these are players you go and pay to watch, and it was 8,000 rattling in there watching us beat Cyprus. God. I'm, to be fair, struggling to beat Cyprus.
Yeah, but I mean, Craig makes a great point. He said about the crowds. He said, we went from having 70,000 people watching, Wales play in the Millennium Stadium to suddenly struggling for any sort of fans in this, 8,000 or whatever. And even now, sometimes there seems to be the odd game where we do struggle to sell out the Cardiff City Stadium. It's a weird thing because then you'll have games like I always remember the Italy game, going off on a bit of a tangent, sorry, but that Italy game which when we won was one of my favorite football matches of all time. But the atmosphere was so raucous, and it was just so, it was like it was like some of those Italian players didn't quite expect what was coming their way from in terms of the atmosphere. But unfortunately, it was only for the big games that you seem to be able to really get those atmospheres going. However, I do think, which of course we'll get to, over probably since 2016, maybe a little bit before, that has changed. I think the move to the Cardiff City Stadium made sense because having, like you say, like 7,000 or 8,000 in a 70,000 seater stadium is, one, not financially intelligent or viable, and also looks terrible and probably sounds terrible to the players as well, because
definitely,
it's just an echo, isn't it, of hearing individual voices and stuff. So yeah, I think John Tosh, I agree with you that his hand was forced, but he also didn't go and chase those players who quit. He didn't, he'd go and beg them to come back, which he could have. He could have made an effort to try and convince them. I know
Big John would never beg anyone to come and play for him. Absolutely not. No. He's, he certainly wouldn't go down that route. And I think there was a game I remember going as a kid, but as a young man, and it was in 2006. I went to watch at the end of 21s playing at Villa Park against England. You remember we almost got to that Euro final, and I just remember Ramsey playing so brilliantly that night. I came away thinking, like, just feeling really positive about it, and I thought that yes, there could be this. There are these players. We do have these players that can come through and be good, but it was. It was hard to see that they were buying into Toshak, because you could see him giving them opportunities. You could see what he was, he wanted these players to play and giving them experience, but I still could never quite see his plan. They never looked like they enjoyed it. They never looked like they were on camp and loving life under him. And that's hard to say, because he was obviously doing his best bit for Welsh football. He was all about, but you could tell it needed something different.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, when you compare the atmosphere within the squad, then compared to from Gary Speed to present day, the passion, the enjoyment, the smiles on the faces, you never ever saw that under Toshak. And I don't. To be fair, I don't think you saw it under Mark Hughes either. I think in terms of
that was a very different. That was a different squad, though, wasn't it? I mean, they were so experienced. He had the type of players he had there were sort of night and day from what Toshak was working with. I mean, the only ones really that stayed with him were what's his name, Carl Fletcher.
Fletcher.
Fletcher stayed, didn't he?
Carl Fletcher, Giggs.
Yeah, Giggs stayed. Well,
Bellamy
turned up occasionally.
Yeah, Bellamy.
Bellamy was a fairly young man at that point, wasn't he? He was
the keeper as well as Southampton keeper. I always forget his name. Bless him.
Yeah, Paul Jones, wasn't there? Jones stayed. But obviously Gabidon played, and you had also James Collins was coming through at that point, or was in and around it. And so you had some decent enough players. We should have been getting better results than we were. And obviously that young Gareth Bale getting very quick acceleration into the first team and bagging free kicks that he's still doing now. So but it wasn't until you sort of saw that kind of late noughties side and the likes of Gunter being introduced and Hennessy and things like that, and you were like, oh, okay. Well, you're feeling it now a little bit, but it still took, Toshak leaving and Speed coming in, and that was the moment it changed, because all of a sudden you actually had some youth in there, and you had somebody who the players really bought into and really understood them as well, and understood them as young professionals in the modern game. And it's tough to say, because I've got so much respect for Tosh, and I think he gets a massively raw deal. And what he did was he went through the pain for what we had to come, but it did take him leaving for that upward curve.
Can I ask you a question quickly?
Yeah.
Has your overall opinion of John Toshak changed from before you made the film and after?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, we were. So I obviously, for my age, I don't really remember Tosh as a player. I don't remember Tosh as a player, apart from watching videos and things like that, and hearing what people had to say about him. My knowledge of him was limited. Like my granddad was from up kind of Liverpool way, and he always talked about how incredible he was. This great force of nature, playing for Liverpool, and so all this, and then I met him. And when did I start working? So my first job was at Real Radio Wales in 2005. That was my first journalist job. And and so he was manager at the time. His press conferences, they were awful to sit through, awful. And so I had this kind of like, God, he's an arrogant old sod. Had a bit of a bore as well. And that was my image of him. But yeah, doing the movie that we've just done recently, looking back at his Swansea time and seeing him up close, you can sort of see the method in his madness, if you like. You know, he was very much like our lead from the front. He had a huge presence about him. He's actually got a bit of there's some warmth in there as well. That arrogance and that confidence is there. Like, he was a leader, if you like. So and schooled in slightly an old school way, if you like. And I think that's where the juxtaposition came. You had the young players coming through, and they didn't quite understand his old school methods, if you like. So I think that's where we didn't get the results that we could have got quicker than we did.
Yeah, and I think with the greatest of respect, like those young players, I mean, if you in the same way that you didn't really know him much in terms of as a playing career, they may not have been overly familiar with him in terms of what he had done in the game, other than to read about it or see clips and stuff. Whereas obviously when Gary Speed came in, they would have all known who he was. They would have all known his reputation within the game, because he wasn't long, out of his playing career at all.
Massive Premier League legend. Absolutely.
When I had Kevin Evans in at ECD Media the other week, travelled all the way from Australia to see me, and he obviously started his career at Leeds before he came to Cardiff, and he tells a funny story about how they were sort of all kids. Like he's just moved up to Leeds, sort of 15, 16 or whatever, and he's got like a completely shaved head, but he's got like a big long fringe. Kevin has, and they're all the kids are sort of sat in the cafeteria, and Gary Speed, who was in the first team at the time, walks past, and he sort of looks in the window of the cafeteria, sort of looks, carries on walking, and then he comes back and he opens the door and he comes in and he says, "Come here." And Kevin went to him and he said, "You're Welsh, you are, aren't you?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Cut that effing hair." And then from then on, he kind of like took him under his wing fully, but like he would give him a bit of time and just explain to him that, you're Welsh and you're representing Wales outside of Wales and you're up in Leeds. And Kevin said like the instant respect that he had, like he didn't take it as like a jibe about his hair. He took it as him looking out for him and him just taking the time to speak to a 15, 16-year-old kid. He didn't need to do it. And Kevin just said the respect throughout the football club for him, even at that age. And I think, you're going back probably best part of 15 years at least, I would have thought. Gary Speed wasn't like an old footballer at that point. He was probably relatively new into the Leeds team. And it was just like a funny little story. But I mean, he was so respected. I've never, ever heard anyone say a bad word about Gary Speed. No. And I know that can sometimes happen when someone passes away. But even before that, like I never heard anybody say anything even remotely negative about him, ever. You never heard a footballer or a manager. I didn't even remember a manager criticizing him, to be honest. He was just so well respected. But like you say, what he did is straight away, all of the players knew who he was. All of the players respected him instantly, and playing for Wales looked fun again.
Yeah, and I just to leap back. Sorry to interrupt, but just to leap back and then so sort of on on the Tosh thing. So when I remember Speed was obviously playing for Wales, and obviously under Bobby Gould, and then you went into Hughes. Now there was a big old drinking culture in the Welsh national team at that point, and that was how they enjoyed themselves when they went to Wales. And they didn't win any bloody games, but they had a good time while they were there, and they enjoyed sort of meeting up, which is all fine. But then Toshak was actually the one, and sort of, you know, with Flynn, and he brought Flynn in to then push these younger players through. And actually what he was trying to do as well was he was changing that drinking culture. He wanted them to be more professional. He wanted them to come on a camp and just think about football. And of course, on an international camp, this can be a little bit dull, I think the players found it. And so they wanted their professionalism, but they didn't want it the way that it was delivered under Tosh. Is my own personal take on it. That's only my own personal take. But yeah, when Speed came in, of course, then it goes, you get that ultra new professionalism that they have at their clubs. You get a younger guy talking to them, talking the language that they understand, and being their hero, and probably the more modern sort of training sessions. I can remember there was when I was doing a game recently, it was the Ukraine game, I think it was, and Dean Saunders was in the studio at TalkSport. So Dean was obviously brought into the coaching staff under Tosh. He said he could remember Gareth Bale taking free kicks and practicing his free kicks, and Tosh apparently came up to Dino, bloody hell, what is he doing? He says, he cannot be kicking the ball like that. He's going to break his bloody foot. Get him off, Dino. Get him. And so, you know, he's got that sort of drive technique, hasn't he, Bale? And so you got that sort of, those new generations. They weren't quite joined up for Tosh, unfortunately. But when Speed came in, he sort of understood those kids. He understood where they were at. Osian Roberts was at that point then had come in about 2007, hadn't he, into the as technical director, and so he and Speed were able to work very closely together, and they took it on not just what they did on the field and the professionalism they brought on the field, but also how they molded the team off it. How they could make it fun, how they could make it so that players wanted to play for Wales and would turn up and play for Wales, and you wouldn't get the Giggs effect where people were pulling out all the time, and you wouldn't get those kind of late cool, I can't be asked, you know what I mean? Like, you know, all those Bobby Gould where he's bringing in players that have barely, you know, any Welsh. I'm not saying any Welsh in them, but you know,
6 times removed.
Yeah, this is a podcast with Andy. Andrew Johnson. Do you remember him from the Gould era? Yeah, played for Forest now. And he was on the podcast. They said, "Oh, you played international football for Wales." He goes, "Yeah, Welsh though." You know, he's a strong Bristolian accent. Oh, right there. Bobby Ford phoned me up, told me I got born over the border, and that was it. I was in. It's like, bloody hell. Do you know what I mean? Like, they just picking up the international shirt because they wanted to come and play. But for Osian and Speed, they sort of also understood that they needed those kids with you know, that are bi-national or tri-national, but they wanted to get them in early. So there was a conscious effort on that. So they would get them in early, schooled early, understand what it is to play for Wales, get that passion in them for playing for Wales. Meanwhile, that's going on underneath, and above it, Speed is putting this ultra modern, ultra professional setup into it and making it fun for the lads to actually go and enjoy playing for Wales.
Yeah, 100%. I'll never forget Vinnie Jones, captain away, Welsh football captain. That was like days, the dark days. But
I want to do a Bobby Gould documentary on his time as Wales manager.
That would be a good one.
Yeah, it might be quite cathartic for those of us that lived through it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. That would be great. I think that would be spectacular, in fact. Do you know,
it'd be mind-boggling. That's what it would be.
Do you know what I compare what Speed and Osian Roberts did very well is similar to what they do in the England cricket. And obviously, people forget that it's the English and Welsh Cricket Board. It's just called England and blah, blah, blah. But what they do is obviously they've got a lot of players who are New Zealand born or Australia born or whatever it may be. But whenever they come in, even if they don't come in young, they do try to get them in young into the county system, and so that by the time they get selected for the national team, they're fully embedded into the English game and the county game, but also they know what it means to play for the country. And you quite find that a lot of them who are, born in New Zealand or Australia or whatever, South Africa, they've all got like England tattoos because they're so ingrained in it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, and they have got, English or Welsh families, whether it's their parents or whatever it may be. But you're right. Instead of just bringing them in like Bobby Gould did, like Vinnie Jones, was coming to the end of his career, I think, pretty much. Andrew Johnson, as Bristol as they come, had no real affinity to Wales. I'm sure he wanted to win football matches when he played, but when it comes down to it, he didn't feel Welsh, and I'm sure he would openly say that.
Yeah,
you just said. 100%. Whereas if you bring guys in to the youth setup, and not only are they playing, in the tournaments and the qualifications and all this sort of thing, but they're also kind of learning about what it means to play for Wales. And I think by the time then they do, come to the sort of the first team, they are fully embedded into it, and they've bought into it. It makes it sound like a cult, doesn't it? But
it's the understanding. It's the understanding of the history and of the people and the place that you're representing, and some of their parents. So like Ethan Ampadu's mum is Welsh, and he goes back to Swansea. He's still got family there and all that kind of stuff. So you can get that very easily. And David Brooks talks about his mum's side of the family, which was very Welsh, and where he'd always go on his holidays and visiting. And so you get those kids, and they are, they feel 50-50 and they feel an affinity with Wales and their family. But then you also get sort of the grandparents of kids who may be born in and around the borders and things like that. And it's and so it's to get them in at that younger age and to get them in. And there's a guy called Cled Ashwin who is absolutely underrated Welsh football hero. I long to do his book or something like that. I'm sure at some point I try and do something with Cled, because he was for God knows how many years, but certainly from around about 2005. And anybody in Flintshire will know him inside out. And he was what do they call him? He was like the educational master. So he was brought in at around about the under 16s era age groups, and he was the one who would teach them how to rap in Welsh. So he rapped the Welsh national anthem, and he gets all the song sheets so they can rap the national anthem, so they know how to sing it, they know how to do it. So at every age group they're going through, they've got this, and he does. Like within their camps under 16, he's doing Welsh history lessons. Like seriously, these kids are coming in, they're doing Welsh history lessons. They're not just playing football, they're learning about the nature and the country and the people and the values and what it means to people to play for Wales, which is so important. And that's why these kids stay. And it's fascinating that Osian Roberts, the way he wanted it to see, he said, look, these kids can come in, and I'm happy for them to go to any of their other nations that they're qualified for, go there, try it out, but I'm confident they'll come back. It happened to Ethan Ampadu. It happened to Brennan Johnson. It happened to Nico Williams. Actually, it didn't happen to Nico Williams. Sorry. It happened to Ben Woodburn, although poor old Ben's gone off the boil a bit. But, these kids have gone out there. They're wanted by England or they're wanted by other countries, and they've gone out there, tried it, and decided on Wales. And they've decided. That's the important bit.
Yeah, and I think when it's their decision, they don't feel like they've been pressured into it because, you've got to make your debut in this game because then you've made your choice or whatever, and that's it. If they don't feel that pressure, they're more likely to buy into it. And the other thing I was going to say is that when you look at the Welsh team now, just very quickly, is they're not all born in Wales. But they all know the national anthem. They all sing it louder and prouder than any Welsh team that I remember, over the years. And that is buying in. That's buying into the whole, the team, the country, the representing the country. And to be fair, Will says in the comments, he says, give Vinnie Jones his credit. He learned the national anthem in an era when not many players did. And pretty sure he's got a Welsh tattoo as well. So.
He has. Yeah, he's got a Welsh tattoo.
Bring him back. Get him in the coaching staff.
Fair play to him. Yeah.
Get him in the coaching staff for the World Cup. That's what I say. Vinnie Jones. So anyway, all right. So Gary Speed came in. That's what I was going to ask you. I think someone mentioned it earlier, just very quickly before we kind of dig into the Gary Speed part of it.
There's an interesting quote. Sorry to interrupt. There's I think it's Owen who's said about Vinnie Jones voted to be captain by his teammates. Gold had a vote, but they all counted it. Now it's my understanding. I can remember. I think it was Southall who was telling this story, and so Bobby had decided to strip him of the captaincy and give it to somebody else. And had got so scared by the way that Jones was looking at him that decided not to take it off there. He called a team meeting and halfway through the team meeting bottled it and just kept him as captain. Which I thought was a hilarious story. I think Bobby Gould should get a right reply in my documentary. Anyway, sorry, we're going off.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Bobby Gould documentary has to
We should do a Bobby Gould session on here. I think
yes. See if we can get the man himself to join us and straighten out all these
Gould
stories.
father. Yeah, absolutely. Do it, mate.
Do you know, someone had said earlier on in the chat about in the Tosh era, just quickly, was that he made Brian Flynn, Brian Flynn was in charge of not just the 21s, but all of the kind of youth teams or the different age groups. I'm sure he had, people who would run them individually, but he was generally in charge of it, wasn't he?
I mean, it was let's be honest about this. It was partly because the FAW didn't have any money to employ anybody else, so they just put Flynn in charge of like the age grade.
21.
But also, there wasn't. So now we've got in the this is again where it's changed in terms of the night and day between the levels of which the FAW are investing in their international football as well, because I think you've got obviously the 15s, which is the sort of the age grade they sort of start coming into. Actually, you've got the 14s, which is regional squads. Then you've got 15s. Then they go into the 16s, which play the Victory Shield. Then they go into 17s, 19s, 21s, and full team. And last year, the FAW then introduced an under-18s team as well. That Matty Jones, another one of those ex-Leeds, and
Kevin
through with Kev, good mates.
Rates him.
Yeah, he was an awesome player. Was Matty? Unfortunately, sort of robbed of his career by injury. Unfortunately, but yeah, that putting in under 18, so you can see the investment that the FAW were making. Now, back in the day, it was literally you've got the under 16s. I'm pretty sure you might have got the under 18s, and then you had the under 21s. And I think the 18s were only just in there. So you only had those sort of three teams that they would invest in. And so therefore, again, being a small nation, those players got pushed up through quickly to the 21s. God, we used to be bloody awful, absolutely dreadful at youth football. And that was part of the reason why, because there was not enough investment there. But you're right, Flinney, whoever brought it up in the comments, absolutely right. Flinney used to run the sort of 21s and the 18s. And possibly even the 16s. He may well have. I can't quite remember that off the top of my head, but yeah, he was sensational. And he was sensational. We started winning games. Actually winning games and producing players. So Flynn, brilliant, and a masterstroke by Tosh to bring him in.
Indeed. So sorry, we skipped back a little bit.
We did. We jumped around there, didn't we?
So Gary Speed, we talked a bit about his impact kind of off the pitch. And one of the other things I think which he invested at some time and certainly brought into the Welsh setup, which I think would have been another positive for those players, was things like sports science and stuff like that. Updated the kind of facilities that was being used. And I think that makes a difference, doesn't it? It's like, when you think back to like Roy Keane and Ireland and the Mick McCarthy, where he left the World Cup, a big part of that was kind of the training facilities and things like that. And I'd imagine that pre-Gary Speed, the Wales, situation was very similar, I would imagine, in terms of training facilities and stuff like that. Why do you think on the pitch it changed so drastically? and not necessarily results-wise instantly. I mean, I think the results were pretty quick turnaround in terms of the positivity about them. But why do you think that everything improved so drastically?
I think it was the performances first and foremost that improved first. And it gave everybody a lift. First of all, it gave everybody a lift because Speed came in, and what an absolute, he could talk to the press, the media loved him, and he was that type of bloke that just held a presence in there. And I can sort of remember him at that point talking the talk and being able to sort of lift the whole nation, if you like. And he brought Aaron Ramsey in as captain, didn't he? Which I think everyone thought, wow,
20.
What's going on here? He's 20 years old and bringing Ramsey in as captain. And you could just see the mentality shift. You saw the style of play shift. And these players were suddenly, although the results didn't go like that, but it was a performances as you were watching it going, this is a young side going places, and this is what a future we've got with these kids, and they're only going to get better as well. And I suppose again that's the Tosh legacy, isn't it? He talked way back in those days of having players on 100 caps, knocking between 50 and 100 caps, and how few players we actually had doing that. And then it was going to be putting, and that's why he started them so young, so that they would have those amount of caps. And Speed was just kind of building on that legacy, if you like, but he was putting that very modern, very Premier League, or his own style onto that pitch, and that swagger. And I think it was Norway, wasn't it? We battered in the last game before his passing, and I can remember coming away from that just thinking, wow, what a team we've got here. We are.
It was exciting, wasn't it?
Oh, it was
for the first time.
It
was exciting to be a Wales fan.
In a decade or so, it was really exciting. And then, sorry, before we get onto that, you're right, the facilities. And I think that was again, and I keep coming back to Oshan as well, because I think it's really important that we remember that Speed was the front man and doing all this, but behind the scenes, Oshan was really trying to, drag the FAW into the 21st century.
Kicking and screaming.
Kicking and screaming, and also Jonathan Ford also coming in to sort of professionalize behind the scenes, and plenty that Jonathan Ford arguable about what he did in the long run and all that kind of stuff, but actually he kind of really led from that as well, and that was really important.
He also Craig just said in the chat, and he's reminded me, of course, Gary Speed brought in Dutch Ray as well, didn't he, with Oshan Roberts, who I think he followed, he went with Bellamy, didn't he, to I think he came to Cardiff as well for a bit as Bellamy's personal fitness coach, if my memory serves me correctly. But I mean, whilst, whatever, but I know people have got mixed opinions of Dutch Ray, but the job he did for Wales was good. But as part of that team, he did a very, very good job. Maybe what happened?
Raymond Verheyen?
Yeah, something like that. It was definitely begun with V.
He was bonkers. He was.
Yeah,
he was absolutely bonkers.
But I'm an advocate of these people within football, like him, like Bielsa. Yeah, they're crackers. Like they're really eccentric characters, and quite often these types of characters, in terms of coaching and managing and being a part of a football club off the pitch, I think you can get magic out of them for short periods of time if they've got a team around them or a person above them who can kind of rein them in a little bit and manage them a little bit. And quite often it doesn't work long term, and I think arguably you could say that with Bielsa with Leeds, it was incredible for a couple of seasons, but eventually it went wrong. Dutch Ray was really good under Speed and with Oshan Roberts, and unfortunately it was the kind of aftermath where it went a bit wrong. And the other thing with Gary Speed and Wales is it's easy to forget that we didn't even get a full year of Gary
it's mad,
Speed.
isn't it?
But it feels like so much longer because of the impact that he had on like Welsh football, on everything, on and off the pitch. So you feel like he had like a couple of years in charge, but then it's only when you kind of really think about it, actually, he took over in, I think it was the December of 2010, and then he had passed away by the following November. It's
awful. It's awful.
Yeah, and I mean, who could have? Just before we kind of touch on that, I wanted to ask you about because go on. This is a bit later, so we'll kind of go with it. Like, you wouldn't have blamed all the players, the managers, the people within the Welsh FA. You wouldn't have blamed any of them if they had walked away after Gary Speed's passing. Any of them, and I mean, the players who were close to him, the players who just knew him as a coach, or the people who'd worked with him within the Welsh FA, because he got so much done both on and off the pitch. So the people within the Welsh FA would have worked so closely with him to change those things. Osian Roberts, people like this, like if they had said, "Look, it's too much for me. I'm gonna, I can't do this. I need to walk away." Nobody, or certainly no one who's a human being, would have said anything negative about that. But I mean, I think it's a tremendous credit to everybody involved that not only did they keep turning up, keep carrying on from a football point of view, of course I'm kind of trying to focus on, but from a humane point of view as well, obviously. But they not only kept turning up, but they carried on what he had put in place, and then eventually evolved, kept evolving. And there were some missteps along the way. It's such a difficult one, but and I think especially for some of the older players in the squad, but also first of all, I was saying, especially for some of those older players, because they would have played with him, and like Bellamy was obviously very close with him and stuff like that. But also Aaron Ramsey as well.
Yeah,
he was only 20, so he didn't play with him, but he would have had a very close relationship with him. He made him his captain ahead of the likes of Bellamy and Giggs and whoever else. Do you remember where you were when you found out that Gary Speed had passed away?
Yeah, I was by this point I had moved to London, and I was working up at Sky News Radio at that point, and I was driving to play in a Sunday league game on a Sunday morning, and it came through on the radio, and it was mad.
I didn't believe it. I didn't.
No.
Ages afterwards.
Couldn't believe it. I tell you, the mark of the man, right? So in our side, we had a right old mixture of fans from all different clubs. We had a couple of Leeds fans who were obviously completely gutted, and we had it. And both teams just went Trevor, minute silence. We just had a minute silence just for that. And that was literally, you'd only heard the news sort of an hour and a half before, but that was the mark of the mark of it, really. And it did feel really weird. It didn't feel, I suppose, properly real until I got home and was sort of watching Match of the Day and listening on the news and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what you mean about the players. I can understand what you're saying, and I think they were completely, I think everybody was completely heartbroken. It was up there in terms of the FAW. But I mean, don't forget, it was his like his best mate who came in to be manager. So his best mate had to come in, suffering the loss, and probably sat in on his dream job, and his dream job was also his nightmare job at that point. And must have been we all saw what Chris Coleman's all about, didn't we? Later on in his managerial, and we really saw the sort of the Chris Coleman that we all came to love in 2016 and beyond. And it was for him to come in and have to do that and pick up the pieces, those players must have been absolutely heartbroken. And without a Ramsey, who had obviously suffered his terrible injuries and all these kind of things. And so, like I can understand why Coleman had the attitude and the resentment that he had for certain members of the Welsh press who treated him like he was any other football manager. They were like, he's losing games and it's not happening, and he's a man. He's got to go. He's not taking his team anywhere. And it's like, God, hang on a second. Like this man has taken over in a position that nobody has ever had to take over a football team at international level that I'm aware of in this situation where almost a national hero has passed away in such tragic circumstances at such a ridiculously young age of life, and for Coleman to have to go through that and manage those players through it and try and win football games, which probably felt like the least important thing of the entire lot, but also, he kept building and he kept trying, and the stability, I think, off the pitch with Oshan and what have you, I think really helped the situation. Obviously something amazing grew out of that. But those first 2-3 years after Speedo, God, it must have been awful. It must have been awful for the players.
And the thing is, he would have been managing, like trying to keep them going and helping them because they're heartbroken and they're struggling, and they would have been finding it difficult to come to Wales duty and things like that. But he was also grieving his one of his best mates, and
100%. I think Will put that in the comments, hasn't he? About and he's absolutely right. Yeah, he would have been grieving himself during that period. And it hit that fan base. The fan base was grieving. Like that might sound a bit trite, but genuinely, I genuinely think it was, and the players there and people that would come and watch, and suddenly that all that hope had sort of disappeared, and things bigger than football had taken over. It was it was a very strange period, very, very strange period, and
it was
a tough one.
It was indeed, and I mean, in between, Coleman struggled at first, and I think the Welsh media didn't always give him the understanding perhaps that he deserved. But also, it was only when he said, "Do you know what? I am carrying on from Gary Speed, but if I'm going to go out, if I'm going to get fired, then I'll get fired doing what I want to do, not trying to continue doing what someone else was doing, if that makes sense." And I think to a certain degree, I think Ryan Giggs falls into the same trap a few years later. For his first sort of year or so, tried to carry on what Coleman was doing rather than implementing what he did, which we'll talk about in just a sec. I just want to touch very quickly on the 2012 Summer Olympics. The Great Britain team would qualify as the host nation. The FAW was against the proposal of a British team, because it was kind of always against it, because the fear was that somehow FIFA would say, Wales is such a small nation, they should just have a UK side or whatever it may be. I don't think realistically that would have ever happened. I don't think. I'd like to think, but you never know, I guess.
Never know, do you?
But Aaron Ramsey and Gareth Bale expressed an interest in representing the squad. Gareth Bale withdrew through injury. His back was hurting him, so got a bad back. Can't play football.
Nope, absolutely not.
But Aaron was joined by 4 other Welshmen in Stuart Pearce's 18-man squad: Joe Allen, Neil Taylor, Ryan Giggs, and Craig Bellamy as the overage players. Giggs was captain. Do you think, or should I say, what is your opinion of a Great Britain team for the Olympics? Are you for or against? If it was purely for the Olympics and there was no danger to Wales as a footballing nation, whether it be through funding or generally as a team, and it was a purely Olympic thing every 4 years or whatever, they get together, they have a Great Britain side.
it all sounds great in theory, but I do think there's a danger that because I think UEFA are genuinely, they would quite happily see the four nations go as a UK team or a Great Britain team, because it's there's four of the on IFAB, which is the governing body. There are only 8 seats, 4 of which are taken up by the home nations. So then the likes of Brazil and Germany and Argentina all have to take their turns in coming round in the other 4 seats, but Britain just stays as 4. So which must really piss other people off, mustn't it?
Oh God, yeah. And when you think of it from that point of view, you can understand why the people within the Welsh FA and the Scottish FA, why they're worried, because they know
English FA either, do they? Bloody hell, they call themselves the FA. They don't even call themselves the English FA. That's the FA. I mean, come on. I just think that, I think football should not be at the Olympics. I think that's
interesting.
Complete. I think it's a bit of a farce. And then I'll caveat that by saying, actually, I understand why women's football should be at the Olympics, because it gives them a platform to be able to show off the game. It gives them a platform for female players to play at the highest level. Men's football is way beyond the Olympics now. It does not need the Olympics. I mean, they're talking about players having far too much. They have far too many games as it is. So why crowbar the Olympics in there anyway, which is essentially an under-23 tournament? We don't need it as Britain. We don't need a team there. And you see what happens with hockey, and you see what happens with these other sports who come together and play under the Great Britain flag. England rule it, and the rest have a couple of players chucked in.
Yeah.
What's the point? What is the point? I don't see the point in it.
I've got
strong feelings on the subject. But
Owen agrees with you. He said, I'm completely against football at the Olympics. We've got World Cup football, leave it for other sports. 100%. However, where's it gone? Someone just made a really good point. Will said, totally fine for a GB side, but what about if it was genuinely amateurs football and not professional? See, that I think is not an idea, because do you know what could come of that is players who are under 23 who are not being picked up by clubs. So
is that for Will? Is that like the Cymru leagues and the non-leagues in England? So like Conference Down and all that kind of stuff. And,
I think
the Highland leagues, and then they sort of come together, and so anybody
you get the best of the best of those. And I suppose what you get from that is what you can get from that is you could have football clubs, or these guys could potentially have like a last chance saloon sort of thing, because I'm sure there's many a quality footballer in these lower leagues and the Sunday leagues who've for whatever reason got dropped at 16 and just play.
I don't know. I just think football has enough, doesn't it? I think
don't need any more games.
Let the Olympics be about athletics and swimming and sports that we've never even heard of, that we all get excited over. Curling once every 4 years, or again, we all become dressage bloody experts and handball experts and things like that. And I don't know. I just think football shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, I could see that point of view for sure. So Chris Coleman, we talked about the difficulties that he sort of had within just the general job. That first year also didn't go well. They lost their first match 2-0. The second match against Serbia was 6-1. I think Holland, I think it was, or Germany, 7-1. And they had a lot of heavy defeats. And then in the October, Ashley Williams was made captain, but Aaron Ramsey, like you mentioned, had that very serious leg break, which actually I think went on to not only affect him, over that year or so period of recovery, I think it affected him long term as well. And I had this conversation with someone the other day. It was on my father-in-law actually, and I actually think if Aaron Ramsey doesn't break his leg, he goes on to be one of the best midfielders in Europe for the remainder of his career. But that injury just left him with constant niggling injuries, where I think he's possibly only had like maybe 1 or 2 seasons where he's played, like
good number of games,
30 odd games in a season, which is really sad, because every time he gets a run of games together, or every time you see him play for Wales, you see his quality and you see just how special a footballer he is. And look, he's had a great career even so, but I mean, those niggling injuries have probably, and I say, it's from the outside, obviously, and it's just my point of view, but I think they've probably cost him, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, they've probably cost him like elite level status in terms of.
I can see what you mean. I can see what you mean.
His ability's there, but his fitness is just not quite there. Appointing Ashley Williams as the captain, was that the start of Chris Coleman's kind of revival and him doing it his way?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was that. I think off the field, he brought in Kit Simons. He brought his mate in alongside him that really helped out and got him coaching. Osham was kind of promoted into the ranks as an assistant to start with, and so they had that core at the team. And then Ashley Williams, he had his captain on the pitch. He sort of decided to go a little bit more defensive. He managed to pick up James Chester from somewhere, and that really helped. And he went, right, Joe, look, I've got this player who is unbelievable in Gareth Bale. I need him on the pitch, getting on the ball, but I need to give him a really solid defense and backline and midfield and structure, and then just let him go. And that's what he did. And we just got that superb kind of bond, and you just saw it growing, didn't you, with the confidence in the players. And
the 2 Scotland games, wasn't it? Which
it was.
You really saw that bond
almost
explode onto the pitch. And I think in one of those games, Bale scores quite a late winner, and
joyous. That was at Cardiff City Stadium. It was a game at Cardiff City Stadium, and obviously the Scots, there were loads of Scots down in the stadium that day as well. And that was kind of my position was right behind the ball where Bale struck it into the top corner. So, and it was Charlie Adam who'd been a little bit of a sod all game, and he'd fouled Bale and just got into a position where you thought, he stopped that attack. I interrupted another attack, and then Bale picks it up, takes a couple of touches, skins Adams and smashes it in the top corner. What a goal in the rain. Poured down as well. So that was pretty special. And then the away game at Hampden as well. That was the one that will live with me. And on the pitch, Bale was ill, so he came off at halftime. We dug out the result. Hal Robson-Kanu headed the winner. Really iconic photo where he's up in the air. He's miles off the ground. Snow's coming down, and he's headed the ball in. Sensational. And but the way we played that night was magnificent. We absolutely battered Scotland. Battered them. And I know it was only 2-1, and the result was in it, but we battered them in the snow that night. And we came off the pitch, and so I was working the game as a journalist there, and there was 2 things that sort of stood out to me that night. One, I found macaroni cheese pies. Who the bloody hell puts cheese macaroni inside a short crust pastry pie?
I don't know, but that doesn't sound good.
Mate, it was sensational. Honest to God, if you ever get the chance, try a macaroni cheese pie. But then the other great thing was after the game, Craig Bellamy comes into the mix zone, and he's got tears in his eyes. Right, he's a hugely emotional guy anyway, Craig. Sometimes really good, sometimes not. It fires up in the wrong way. But he had tears in his eyes, and he goes, "I tell you what, this team will go places. This team, I'm telling you now, this team, if they play like that, they've set a mark, they've set a standard. If they play like that and they turn up and they play in that manner with that focus, they've got the ability to go places, real places that Welsh football has never been before." And I can always remember standing there thinking, like, and he was there going, I won't be here to see it. I'll be gone. My time has come and gone. But I'm telling you that this team is going places. And it was like, wow. And that just stuck with me. That night stuck with me over the next few years. And still now, I still think back to it, and like, he could see it. They could see it and feel it in the change rooms. They could see it and feel it before we got to see it. And yeah, it was that. And no, Craig, they weren't battered. They weren't. They were just beautiful, soft crust pastry, short crust pastry kind of pies.
It's like it was like a wave, though, wasn't it? It was that was the beginning, and those Scotland games in particular. We lost to Croatia twice, so we didn't qualify from that group. But by the end of that qualifying period, there was a change in. So, like when Gary Speed passed away, all that you said it perfectly yourself a few minutes back. You said all that hope had kind of gone, and I just feel like that's the two Scotland games, but particularly the second Scotland game, that you could feel like this just wave of optimism again, and suddenly it was almost like everyone, oh yeah, remember we got all these young players who have been playing Welsh football for 5 years now or whatever it was. These are experienced but young footballers who are all playing Premier League and Championship football. We're not as bad as we once were. Wales qualified for Euro 2016. It's such a weird thing. We had, who was it? Who we had in? I think it might have been Kevin Evans, when we were at A.C.E Media the other week, wasn't it? And he said, like, his kids, they don't understand what all the fuss is about because they've qualified for 2 Euros and now World Cup. They're used to it. It's like, what you're moaning about. But like, I remember, like, when we qualified for those Euros in 2015 probably, but 2016 Euros, like, I just remember not quite being able to believe it. Even after we'd qualified, it was like this, I just don't understand. Like, I'm so used to failing at the last hurdle. Like, what do we do now? And the trip to France. But like, talk to me a little bit about that qualifying period for the Euros in 2016. Really testing your memory now, mate. And
that's all right. I can remember it was a slow build, wasn't it? As I remember, we had the Andorra game, which we all remember was pretty tough, and it's arguable that Bale doesn't stick that free kick away, and then Coleman doesn't even get to the end of the year as Wales manager, because for all the goodwill and I defended him, obviously just now, and talked that he wasn't given the support at the start, but there does come a point further down the line where you're going like, well, okay, he stabilised the ship, he's got them going, but maybe somebody needs to take it to the next level. So they beat Andorra, and that kind of that starts a little something, and then it was the home games, wasn't it? And it was Bosnia, and we got that 0-0 draw against Bosnia, and I tell you what, you could see the battle and the heart that went into that. Really, really went into that, and I thought, for me, that was such a great performance. Then we had the Cyprus game, wasn't it? It was a real kind of, we played really well for a good bit of time in that game. I think we had a sending off against Bosnia, didn't we? Did we have a sending off against Cyprus as well?
I definitely had one against Bosnia.
We definitely had a sending off against Bosnia, didn't we? And then we were winning. We were cruising because we were absolutely superb for about 20 minutes against Cyprus. And then I've got a feeling we could see the daft goal. Is there a sending off? I can't quite remember. But then I can just remember us being like hanging on at the end, and the relief when we actually kind of got over the line there. And then all of a sudden you were like going, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, we got some points on the board here, and then there was that. Then it got to that Israel away game, and all of a sudden it just all came together. And I still say I think that's one of possibly the best away performance if you go from the Coleman era, say for the last decade, 2012 to 2022, I would say that away performance against Israel was sensational. There you go, Will. You got it. 3-0, and they were lucky at 3-0. They were lucky because we were that good. Defensively, like, we just stood up and absolutely nailed them. We nailed them and didn't give them an inch. Going forward, Ramsey was sensational, and Bale obviously was Bale, and it was just that was an indicator of the type of performances which were to come in 2016. And I think at that moment, suddenly the momentum we had was magnificent. It was going to take a lot to stop us, but obviously we had Belgium to come at home, didn't we? And it was all kind of building up to that, which was what a night! What a night!
Yes. It was incredible, and I just remember during that period, like as you were all, like, there's that cliche of take each game as it comes, but it was literally like, it wasn't just take each game as it comes. You were counting down because we'd finally got off to a good start in the qualifying, in the qualifiers, like, which was rare. So suddenly you found yourself after a few games, and you're like, hang on a minute, looking at the fixtures, you get your calculators out, and you're thinking, if we can get some points here and there, and we could do this. And then it was just like each game.
It was like a cup final. Each game was like a cup final.
Grinding out these results, and the excitement would grow. You go back to your calculations, and
when you look at that side, and you looked at what we had, and I know it wasn't, we still, as a Welsh side, we really still had those players who would come in and you fit them in and around, like David Cottrell would come in and have to play a game and what have you. And we still had that, but we had everybody turning up for the squads. Coleman had them now. You now had them turning up, game in, game out, international window in, international window out, very few pullouts, certainly no pullouts that you would end up going to question. But, the odd injury, which is just natural. But, the players were there and they wanted to play. And when you look at that back three that we had with Chester and Williams in there and Davis, superb. What a back three that was. And then you go into the wing backs, and that was arguably the weaker points of the team, I suppose, with Guntz and Neil Taylor, but both very, very able, both very, very capable of playing how Coleman wanted them to play. In the midfield, Joe Ledley, he was a top level midfielder alongside Joe Allen, who was at Liverpool at that point. And then you had the likes of not Liverpool at that point, sorry, at Swansea, but really talented young player coming through, and suddenly you had all these guys who were actually kind of top level players, and they were just coming to the boil at the front time. And that night at the Cardiff City Stadium against Belgium, I know we ground out the draw away, hadn't we, at their place, but the noise that night was magnificent. That was where we saw the type of atmosphere at the Cardiff City Stadium that we see game in, game out now. And there we'd just seen it flitting in and out for certain games, like the Bosnia game and the game against Cyprus, and the sort of relief in getting over the line. But that Belgium game was something special, and Bale just being Bale, Bale.
I was just having a quick look back through that qualifying the period, because I was trying to work out if we had lost any games at all in that run into the qualification, because I had in the back of my head that we had lost one.
No,
we didn't.
No, we didn't lose. We didn't lose until
unreal.
We needed to bloody qualify.
Yeah.
And then to see that I know am I leaping
That's
forward?
That's the most Welsh thing ever, though, isn't it?
Yeah, am I leaping forward too quickly now? Do we need to go over the?
No, we don't need to go through every single game. Like, it's just it's that, like, that Belgium game was the point, I think, for everyone, where we were like, right, okay, this is happening. Get on board.
Yeah, 100%. But once we won that, actually, I was like totally confident we were going to go through unqualified, because you looked at the points and you thought we would really, really have to balls it up from here to not qualify.
Especially when you considered that we'd outplayed Israel already at their place, and we had Cyprus.
That was
they were the next two games, so it was like.
And the Cyprus game was again, wasn't it? It was exactly what this team was about. It wasn't a great performance, bobbly old pitch, sweltering hot conditions. We got ragingly drunk for several days. I'm talking about the fans, not the players, thankfully. And then and we'll have pool parties in Ayia Napa and things like that. And it was absolutely superb. And then the game came and it was dreadful. And we just dug in and we didn't concede and we didn't really create. And then all of a sudden, Jazz Richards, I think it was, popped up with the cross for Bale, and bang, we were going to the Euros. And then it was the biggest anticlimax against bloody Israel, wasn't it?
Oh my good God!
Everybody rocked up for a party, for a big promotion party. We are going to do it, and it was the most god awful goalless draw ever. Wasn't it? And I just went when I know that the Cyprus performance I kind of got, because we were away from home and we had to dig in and all that kind of stuff. And Israel just came to defend on the edge of their area. I was so disappointed. I thought they might have come at us to try and nick it, but they didn't. They just sat and we sat. And just nothing really happened for 90 minutes, did it? And
no, it was a dreadful game, wasn't it? And then obviously we lost to Bosnia 2-0.
Yeah, and qualified.
So that's like.
Where were you when that happened?
Thing.
What were you up to that night?
I believe I was in the pub, because I remember that. I'm trying to think, because the last few games became a bit of a blur in terms of like home, goal, away, pub, and it was just. Like I say, it was building. So like in between each international break, for the first time ever, I was looking forward to the next international break. Whereas for so long, the international break had always been like almost like an inconvenience. And then all of a sudden I found myself clinging to like look into these dates and like, oh my God, right, when's the next international break? Oh, why isn't it closer? Why isn't there more international breaks? But like, it was unbelievable, and I just
go on, sorry.
I'll never forget it. I just it was a very, very emotional time, and we'll talk about the World Cup now in a minute. But like, so for the Euros, for Euro 2016, when we qualified, I was emotional, but I was like, thank God for that. Like it was like a just a massive, huge relief. But I also think because the build-up was like win after win after win after win, it was almost like like you said, I suppose, if we had ballsed it up, it would have been the most Welsh thing ever. But it was like with every win, it was becoming more difficult to mess up, basically.
Yeah, it really was. And so that game against Bosnia, right? So I didn't get to go out to it, which I was really gutted about. To Zanica, because they've got to do it this time. And I know we still had the game at home, didn't we, against Andorra to go, where we could have just, even if we lost against Bosnia, we could still beat Andorra at home and qualify. And I think it was Wales were playing Australia maybe in the afternoon in the rugby. And so I live in Chepstow, so it's like here, it's like border town in it, so not as many English out and about as Welsh, and the rugby was on in the afternoon, and everybody was pissed in the pub, and I thought I'll get downtown and watch the game, and it was such an anticlimax because obviously we lost. The pub was barely interested in the game because they've been smashed all day watching the rugby. And I was kind of watching it, and we qualified. I was like, oh, there's no one here to share this moment with. Mate who I'd gone out with for a couple of beers and a couple of other people who were semi-interested. I just went for a little walk. I went for a little walk just to try and get my head around it. I was like, oh, this is not how it was meant to be.
Yeah.
This is not how it's supposed to be.
It's meant to be like a win and a big
This is like the moment. This is the moment I've been waiting all my life for, and I had to just go out for a little walk around Chepstow on my own. That was it. But we had to save that for the Hungary home game a few years later when we qualified. That was when we really
got the party then, didn't we?
Really had the qualification party that night. Well, and of course, yeah.
It's a weird thing though, right? Because I talked about this a little bit the other day. Like I have pre this period, I had accepted that Wales were never going to make a major tournament in my lifetime. So I'd kind of come to terms with it. It wasn't like a big deal in terms of it was unexpected. So like I didn't get as emotional as those near misses back when I was a bit younger, because we were so close and this and that. Like I'd kind of just, we're just not going to do it. And then all of a sudden you found yourself winning game after game after game, and the build-up was mental. And and then obviously like the tournament was beyond the wildest dreams itself, because for me, my thing before the tournament was like, I don't really care where we, what we do. I would love to get out of the group.
Yeah,
get out of the group. That'd be amazing. But like, that was basically it. The one, it was like, if we can get out of the group, I would be so thrilled. Score some goals maybe in the group stage. Just a couple. Happy days. Go and see 3 Wales games in France and soak up this atmosphere that I never thought, we never thought we'd experience. Yeah, that's it. Everyone was happy with that outlook. So what you had these thousands of Welsh fans going out to France with this just relaxed attitude of, we're just going to enjoy this, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to mix with everyone, and we're going to just have a few beers and sing. And we created the "Don't Take Me Home" song, which is now sung everywhere at the England cricket, at the England rugby, and we started that in Euro 2016. Like without going bit by bit through the tournament.
Yeah. Like, otherwise we would go till midnight, won't we?
Exactly that. Like, is the Belgium game the special one from that tournament for you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue it wasn't. I mean, there's just so many wonderful moments through it, wasn't there? And you could just pick through the anthem of Bordeaux, the Bale free kick against Slovakia just to get things going, the Ben Davies clearance, and you can keep going. And it was just wonderful. It was just an absolute dream, and a dream that you just didn't think you'd wake up from. And totally agree that the Davies and Ramsey yellow cards
cost us.
If not cost us a place in the final, it cost us actually fully competing and pushing Portugal all the way, which I think we really, really would have. I don't know whether we would have won. I don't know that. I think it's too simplistic to say that we would have won because they had Ronaldo. They had Ronaldo, and it's as simple as that. And they had some other damn good players as well. But I think that the Belgian game was just special, wasn't it? Because we didn't scrape past them. We didn't scrape past them.
We did it from behind as well. Like we lost. We were 1-0 down after what was it? Like I think 5 or 6 minutes. And what a goal, by the way! That goal was insane.
But we just played and we played and we played and we played and we just kept playing, and it wasn't like we were defending and hitting them on the break like we did at the Cardiff City Stadium and taking our chance when we had it. It was like we literally outplayed them. When Sam Vokes headed, Sam, I know, it's just wonderful goal, wonderful goal, and always gets forgotten in amongst the Hal Robson-Kanu stuff. So
how stressful was that game? Like in terms of the chances that Belgium missed. Like Fellaini misses one from the 6-yard box. It was
true enough. But maybe my brain actually kind of forgets those moments, because I think for me it was always like the complete performance. Like we never, early on, obviously we were rocking.
I've watched the highlights a lot. I watched them again recently, actually, and Belgium in the second half they missed some big chances. Like there's one Fellaini one from like literally the 6-yard box in the middle of the goals on his head, free header, and he puts it wide inexplicably. And there's a couple of others. But look, Wales deserved that. And like that Hal Robson-Kanu goal is not just a special goal for Wales. That's a goal which will be replayed at every Euros forever.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those which will be in that,
100%.
the packages and stuff like that. But again, in the qualifiers, we were saying like it was just like you'd win one and then you'd win again, and it was just this momentum built. It was the same in the tournament. Like, we lost to England, but we just kept grinding out results. Like we had a good result against Slovakia. We destroyed Russia in a bit of revenge from that playoff, and then we ground out against Northern Ireland, and it was like you're in the semi-finals, and you were just like, what is going on?
Oh, this is mental. Yeah, like you can go through all of those games and you saw every inch of that side. I know a lot of people are now saying, is this side better, the one that's qualified for the World Cup, than the 2016 one? For me, the 2016 side still beats this side just at the moment.
At the moment.
I think that this team has the potential to be better, but like that we had Premier League warriors in our team at that point. You go through that entire starting 11 as our strongest 11 then, for example, and pretty much all of them are Premier League players, bar Chris Gunter, who's obviously playing at wing back, because of Vokes at that point was playing for Burnley. Reading were a Premier League side with Al Robson-Kanu, or we're that sort of yo-yo team. Ledley, Allen, obviously Ramsey and Bale in his pomp, Ramsey in his pomp, Allen in his pomp, Hennessy at the height of his powers. And you think, I think that I think this team can be very, very special. But it is going to take, them going through the levels as players to get there.
I just wish they play Ethan Ampadu and the holding midfielder role. That's my wish for the next few years.
Actually, Will's just called me out, and he's absolutely right. Hal Robson-Kanu was unattached.
Absolutely he was.
His Reading contract had come to an end, and he was looking for pastures new, wasn't he, at that point?
Indeed. So after that tournament, we went into the World Cup qualifications. Everyone was on a high and thinking, is this it? Are we going to qualify for a World Cup finally for the first time in all these years? And it just didn't. It didn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Chris Coleman ends up leaving in the November 2017 to go to Sunderland. Sunderland, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Sunderland till I die.
Wow,
amazing doc.
It's a beautiful bit of media. It's so why didn't it happen? Like, without going through each game and all the rest of it, like what went wrong?
Well, first of all, we became a team that that everybody knew about. we weren't a surprise package anymore. I suppose you could say, could you argue Coleman didn't change the tactics enough? Yeah, that could be argued. But then again, it got us where we got to. So, and with the personnel he had, you couldn't see a great change. We didn't have a bunch of youngsters coming through that you thought, oh yeah, we're going to change it with those. Like when it came to it, and he did. You got that iconic photo in Paris, in his penultimate game, and there's Ampadu, Woodburn and Brooks all coming on as a triple substitution, which, by the way, what a photo opportunity that was for Coleman. He saw that coming, didn't he? I have these three boys stood by me, 3 subs. Here I am ushering on the future of Welsh football. It was sensationally done, but they were kids. They were children at that point. I know Ben Woodburn really kind of burst onto the scene to give us something, but like you couldn't throw them in at that point. You really couldn't. So I don't.
Like they were literally children.
They were literally children. Yeah, they were like 17. Yeah, and I don't see what difference they would have made. Bale, unfortunately, was injured. I think there was a stat that we barely had Allen, Ramsey, and Bale as our 3 kind of most pivotal players on the pitch. We barely had them playing together through that entire tournament. We had Bale suspended, was it, I think, for the Serbia game. We had Ramsey out injured for the Ireland games. If he made one mistake, and then obviously Bale was injured, wasn't he, for the last two games against Georgia and Ireland. The one mistake I think he possibly made, Coleman, and it was Ireland away in Dublin. And I think he went in too toe-to-toe with them. He tried to turn it into a big British derby. I think he should have been cleverer. In that game. And
it's what they wanted, that wasn't it?
They dragged us down to the trenches. And we played up to that in terms of our physicality and how we approached that game. And I think if I've got one criticism for him in that qualifying campaign, that was it. But we went to Serbia and we were brilliant out in Belgrade, and I was out there for that, and we could have won that. We were so close to winning that. And if we'd have won that again, it finished 1-1. But okay. So lots of if buts and maybes. But that team should have gone
small
to
margins.
the World Cup in 2018. It should have gone.
And like Craig makes a good point. It is harder to qualify for the World Cup. There's more teams involved, and etc. etc.
And Craig's absolutely right, because we always say, we failed in qualifying against Ireland, but we didn't, because Ireland went into the playoffs and got battered by Denmark, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we failed to get in the playoffs, but to not get in the playoffs was a failure. I think it was a good group to have had a qualifying campaign with.
For the first time ever, or certainly in my lifetime, I can remember, we didn't have a big boy. Well, we were the big boys in the group, really. Like in terms of you didn't have a Belgium or an Italy or a Germany or whoever. Like for the first time, because of the success in the previous Euros, and I did feel personally, as we came out with that, the Irish games and the Serbia games, I did feel like we'd missed an opportunity. And that's when I did wonder, is the World Cup thing ever going to happen? Because I just felt like I'm so used to always having like a Belgium or an Italy or someone in your group that when you finally don't have those teams and you look at it on paper, you've just come off, we're semi-finalists of the Euros. We've had a great thing. And we got Georgia,
Moldova,
Ireland, and Moldova and Austria, wasn't it? And thinking, come on.
We came back, didn't we? First game back, and we smashed Moldova 4-0. And he looked at it and he just went, this team's different. This team is different, and they're still buzzing. And I just think that autumn, the summer buzz, and then they're going back into pre-season, and they'd never experienced that short amount of time that you need as a top player to get over your tired legs and get back into the groove and all the rest of it. And I just think we just didn't quite hit the ground running fast enough that autumn. That Moldova game apart, and that left us playing catch up. And at that point, we were always behind the 8 ball at that point. So Chris Coleman left November 2017. 2 months of no manager. Eventually, certain Mr. Ryan Giggs was appointed manager. Signed a 4-year deal. A lot of fans, were not particularly enthused by the appointment, I think is fair to say. There was certainly a mixed reaction to it. Yeah.
However, I think that initial period was very difficult for him. And I think he tried to carry on with what Coleman had been doing previously. And I think he stuck with some of those players, which maybe he probably could have moved on for. I don't know. Maybe it's a difficult one.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
And then it was only when the pressure started to maybe ramp up a little bit on Giggs that there was definitely a change in philosophy. At some point, I'm trying to find the list of his games in charge, but I forget off the top of my hand. But there was definitely a point where there was a visible change in tactics, philosophy, squad selection. People like Hal Robson-Kanu and a few others disappeared. And it was a very, very, very young squad again. But he got him going. And then, yeah, look, I think, I said right at the start of the show, mate, I said some people don't get enough credit for what they've done. And I sort of hinted that I thought he was one of them. As a manager of Wales, and you take everything away from football out of it, and you take his friendlies as a player out of it, just as his period as a manager at Wales, I think he deserves credit for bringing in the young players, sticking with them, giving them confidence, playing a certain type of football, and getting where he qualified for the Euros.
Yep.
Do you agree or do you disagree?
No, I definitely agree to an element. I think. So then let's go through that sort of point by point, if you like. So there was a mixed feelings about him taking over as manager. Definitely. I think that had more to do with how he was viewed personally and how he was viewed as his Wales career by the hardcore fans who had felt totally let down by him and his appearances for Wales. That could be argued two ways. I know he says, look, 67 caps is still a pretty decent cap haul. But then he did play until he's 40 and had retired from international football for a while he turned up for Great Britain. So there was definitely that element to it. So yeah, mixed bag on that. Totally agree. I think to start with, the way he pulled it around and freshened it up, I think he was maybe a little bit too brutal on some of the older players too quickly. But I sort of get why he did it. He did it in a very John Tosh kind of way, I suppose, really, if you want to draw parallels to it. And in terms of the way he sort of brought those, he went for the youngsters and he went, right, come on, I'm not going to get anywhere playing with these older players because they're coming to the end of their careers and we can dog it out for another year or two. But what's going to be left for me? Anything? And I think what he had was a vision that World Cup 2022 was his aim. And if he could qualify for the Euros in 2020, then great. And they would definitely be in contention for it. But I think he and Jonathan Ford had come to an agreement that 2022 and that World Cup was definitely going to be the aim. And that is why he went straight to the younger players and tried to get him in. We had that wonderful game, didn't we, against the Republic of Ireland, where we battered them 4-1 and we could have battered them about 8-1. And you thought, wow, if this is the way he wants us to play. Now, I spent a lot of time earlier on in the show singing the praises of Osian Roberts. So I don't mean this as in any way derogatory to Osian, because what he did for Welsh football has been absolutely wonderful. However, I don't think he should have been kept on as an assistant manager. Or he wasn't assistant, actually. He was the Albert Stuvenberg was assistant and Osian was first team coach. And so he was he went for the top job, didn't get the top job, lost his assistant manager job, became first team coach. And I just think that dynamic between the three of them just didn't work. Coleman, Osian is a very tactical guy. He's on the coach. He's a coach's coach. He talks coach speak, and he's a coach's coach. And he's got a big old brain, and he sees the big strategy and the bigger picture. Great guy. But he's not a Chris Coleman. He's not a Chris Coleman who wraps himself around you and you go run through brick walls for him, and that type of bloke and that type of manager. So he was great with Chris because he could bring the tactical side and Chris could bring the man management, and Kit Simons was there to sort of be the jovial guy. There was between the three of them, it was a great combination. And then you had Ryan, Albert Stuvenberg, and Stuvenberg's quite a nice guy, actually. I've met him. He's really good company, really nice chap, very snazzy dresser. So he's got a good little personality to him as Albert. And he's obviously a very, very tactical coach. And him and Ryan, I think, come from quite a different tactical background. Then Oshan was trying to play. I think Oshan probably felt a bit left out in it all. He'd not got the top job. He was relegated to first team coach. I just think that dynamic between the three didn't work. So that's why you always saw bitty performances, and you had the youngsters coming in. So it wasn't quite working. And the moment it turned was when Rob Page joined the setup. Oshan left, went to Morocco. Rob Page was promoted from the under-21s. And I just think you just started to see that in that autumn. It was Rob Page that said, bring in Joe Morale and put him in midfield. It was apparently him. They'd already taken a look at Kiefer Moore, and Page was pushing for him. And Page is very much he's not the same bloke at all as Chris Coleman, but he is in that vein. He's honest as the day is long. He'll tell a player if they're crap. He'll tell a player if they're brilliant, and he'll put his arm around them, or he'll give them a bollocking, and they'll know it's coming from an honest place. He's a really, really honest bloke. And I think the players absolutely adore that. They love Pagey. They do. They love him. And so bringing him into that dynamic with it, that's where you saw the performances go, and that's where you saw the run of performances that took us to Hungary and that wonderful night at the Cardiff City Stadium. And so that's my own take on it, is that it was Page's introduction into the backroom staff, which was the launch pad for that Ryan Giggs team. And then obviously what happened. And we won't talk much about that because that is still a live court case, and
yes, indeed.
That's nothing to do with this. But obviously, then Page takes over, and I think that's why you've seen a continuation of success. And almost, I think now Page has, he kind of, it's almost like the whole thing kind of replicating itself. Toshak comes in, Toshak goes, Speed comes in. Coleman wants to do what Speed's done, but then pushes it on. Well, Giggs comes in and be his own man, but not quite his own man. And Page helps him to be his own man. He goes. Page then takes over and is Ryan Giggs for a while. Giggs was like, there were things like Page was taking halftime phone calls. From my understanding, that he was taking halftime phone calls from Ryan, and Ryan was picking the teams and things like that. And you're like, this is madness. The man's nowhere near the game.
Into the Euros, didn't it?
The man's
the actual tournament.
Well.
Allegedly, we'll say.
That I don't know, and that I haven't been. Yeah, by my understanding was that by the Euros, it was very much Page's team, but obviously with Stuvenberg was there still, and so therefore had a big kind of play on tactics and things like that. And Page was not.
Still felt like Ryan's team though in the Euros, and I think there was quite a common thing on social media and the shows that we were doing in the Euros. Like people were saying, is Robert Page picking the side or is Ryan Giggs picking the side? It was very confusing, kind of.
Yeah, no. I think by then. So I think Craig's putting there how much influence did have in the early days. A lot of influence, from my understanding. Craig, it was a lot of influence. It was like the USA game and some of the National Nations League game, but the games that were taking place behind closed doors, and because it was COVID times, and Ryan was making phone calls in during games. He was picking teams alongside Page. Page was making the calls and obviously reporting back.
That's completely unattainable, isn't it? That's just.
But you couldn't continue. You couldn't continue in that way, and so that obviously lent to it. But I think by the time they got to the Euros, I think you were starting to see Page really put a stamp on it. Yeah. Because you were seeing, he was making decisions with how Robson Kanu would come back in. He was sending the lads home because he felt that they'd overstepped the marks. He was putting down his marker that I'm the manager here. Now you will listen to me. And at that point, I think it was starting to move away from Ryan, and it was definitely being seen as Pagey's team. The leftover bits were from Albert Stuvenberg still being in there. And I don't mean that in a bad way, mind. No. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there was conflict or anything like that. But what I was saying is that it wasn't
just a crossover, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a crossover period. It was Page was in there, but he didn't have any of his own men. He was just literally taking over the setup, and the setup was working fine. And because they were getting results, so you wouldn't change it as such, and you still had the coach in there because he said he'd agreed to stay on during the qualifiers. But I think you've seen the team go again to a new level since Stuvenberg has left, and Hill's been brought in, and all of a sudden you've seen Kit Simons coming back into the sorry, not Hill, Alan Neil. And you've seen Alan Neil come back as the coach. You've seen Kit Simons brought into the setup, and then you see the other coaches in there, and obviously you've got Strudwick as well is still there, and you can see that there is now a really tight bond between the coaches. The coaches are all on the same page. It's very, very much Robert Page's team. It's the way Rob Page wants to play it and do it with coaches that he's chosen. So it's his backroom staff and his. Again, absolutely not a dig at Albert Stivenberg at all, because I think he did a great job for Wales, and I just think it was the circumstances. But yeah, now you can see it's Page's team, and now you're seeing the results of that, I think, and you can see the players. The players are run through brick walls for him and that coaching staff, and that is so important at international level.
Yeah, I can't believe how much you hate Albert. It's unbelievable.
Well, you don't want to, when you compare and you're saying like it's Page's team and stuff like that, and I don't want it to seem like
I know
it's a dig at Albert because it's absolutely not. So yeah, I just want to make that absolutely clear.
Interesting couple of wrinkles though from the whole thing is, so first of all, obviously Giggs' target was 2022 World Cup, which also meant that his contract rolled over when they qualified, which is an interesting wrinkle, which we discussed in your office the other week. Was like, this could develop into something very complex at a really unneeded time.
Yeah.
And actually, within a week or two, it was all done and dusted. But also the other wrinkle, which I find, and I base this purely off my own social media, and during the Euros, we were doing 3 shows a week, so we had a load of interaction from people. People weren't entirely happy with Robert Page after the Euros. I think it's fair to say there was, not that they were unhappy necessarily, but there was a few people saying, I don't know whether he's up to the job, or if he's, if it's just maybe a bridge too far. There was questions, at least, shall we say. But like, to me, I thought there was a couple of questions. There was a few things I didn't necessarily agree with or whatever, but ultimately I thought he did a pretty good job in the Euros in very difficult circumstances. But since the Euros, I think he's put any question of it to bed. And
don't forget, Mike,
you mentioned the additional wrinkle. We're working with someone else's team, aren't you?
Yeah, but don't forget, Page has been working essentially on a bloody like match-to-match basis almost. International window to international window. So he would get a contract to see it through the autumn, and then like what happens then? Oh, and then a few months later he agrees like the a deal to take it through March, and then or give him another contract. It's like come on. Somebody make a decision here. Somebody put their balls on the table and make a decision.
As soon as they moved to Robert Page's team and not Ryan Giggs' team in terms of the backroom staff, that's when some sort of decision should have been made.
Yeah.
But I understand the reasoning why, and we're not going to go into those reasons.
I'm no lawyer. Yeah. I don't know the ins and outs of what it all meant contractually or anything like that. And it's very easy to sit there and say, oh, well, Ryan Giggs should have done this, or, the FAW should have done that. And you can have an opinion on it, but it would be only an opinion. It wouldn't be based on legal knowledge or anything like that. So
indeed.
What we had.
We will finish off with the Ukraine game now, because that's the obvious place to start, to finish. But I wanted to just ask you about, which is kind of weird because we're going to destroy the order of things a bit. But I wanted to ask you about Ryan's decision to quit and when he quit, and kind of were you surprised, and was it the right thing to do, etc., etc.
Oh, I think one of Gareth Bale's Nations League press conferences pretty much put that to bed, didn't he? When he came out and said, I think Rob Page should be the long-term. Is Rob Page the manager to take Wales to the World Cup? Absolutely not. I think Rob Page is the long-term manager of Wales. When Bale comes out and says that, that's where the team. That's where the team's at. That's where the players are at. and therefore I think there was only one decision to be made, and Ryan did it. Yeah. Obviously, did what he felt he needed, and I think that he was kind of left in no doubt that times have moved on, and even if his court case comes back and there was a possibility of him taking Wales over at the World Cup, it would not have been a good look. It would not have been welcome back.
No.
So
I think should things go his way, if he had tried to come back for the World Cup, that would rub the players up the wrong way. However, by quitting when he did, what he can or has potentially opened the door to is, in the future, he could come back as Wales manager, depending on X, Y, and Z from away from football. Whereas if he had kind of bulldozed his way through on a legal standpoint.
So do you think Page should get a contract now, or would you wait until the World Cup?
Well, see, that's the interesting one. I think he's got a contract now, hasn't he, to the end of the World Cup?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because the chances are you give him a 3-year contract, and we have, the most dreadful World Cup performance ever, and you're like, oh, we're just giving him a 3-year contract. But then
does that matter?
Well, that's what I was going to follow up with.
Would you fire him if he doesn't get out the group?
I wouldn't fire him if he didn't get out the group necessarily. But there is, if we was to lose all 3 games 5-0, I know it's unlikely, but
no. It's yeah. I don't
see the harm in waiting until the World Cup's over.
My genuine opinion is, even if he lost all those games 5-0, I'd still give him a long-term contract. And now that sounds crazy, but then it's not going to happen, right? But it's conceivable that we come away from the World Cup with 1 point, or that could happen. It could happen. You'd like to think it wouldn't, but there are 4 teams that are very closely matched in terms of world rankings, so all that kind of stuff. But I think you give him the long-term contract. Why not? You've got a young side there. He's not going to have Bale forever. I'd like to think that Bale looks at it and goes, well, I've got 18 months to go until the start of the Euros. Start of the Euros in Germany, which will be an incredible tournament. I'm 33. I could get another 18 months done. Maybe he's enjoying life out in LA and thinks, I could do another year of this. Fingers crossed. And he goes out there and he plays a bit and he comes back and he's happy and everybody cracks on. And these young players need those. They need the Joe Allens to stick around for another year. They need the Hennessy to stick around for another year. They need Ramsey going to find somewhere to play football on a regular basis and stick around for a couple of years. And I wouldn't change it in the slightest. I think Page has done a cracking job, and I think there's more to come from Rob Page as well. That's the exciting thing. That as a manager, I think he's learning on the job. And I think he's learning quickly, really quickly. Doesn't always get it right. Always get it right, and that's that's what it is. But I'm with Will. Page keeps his job, whatever happens.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think the point I was making more was he's got a contract till the end of the World Cup, so I don't see there's no harm in discussing it after the World Cup. But also,
I agree. I agree with that.
That could also be the most Welsh thing to do, because we could go and get to the semi-finals again, and then suddenly Robert Page's demands have doubled, rightly so.
Or we're off the back of it because the Premier League have just had a 6-week break, and there's a couple of clubs there who've gone Slingy Rook manager, and are looking at a Rob Page to come in and be a club manager and offer twice the amount of money that we can offer at the FAW. So look, you take your chances, don't you? In that respect, I don't see any reason in why we wouldn't stick. Give him a nice fat contract, or not a fat contract, but just give him a long-term contract. Is what I mean, a long-term contract to take us through to the Euros in 2024. Qualifying starts in March, by the way, for the Euros.
Jesus.
Yeah. We get the draw in October time, I think it is, and then we come off the back of the World Cup, and our first game back is a qualifier for the Euro 2024
That is
tournament.
insanity, isn't it? How quickly they come on.
Isn't
But
it?
and most of all, Laurence, there's
It keeps me at
no
job,
one
mate.
else out there, mate. Well, that's it. Where would you be if you didn't have football matches
Keeps me off the
constantly?
streets, pal.
That's it. But also, like there's not like a manager out there which I'm thinking
No.
he'd be a good Welsh manager. So,
Amen, Craig.
even from that front,
amen to Craig. Do the deal now. Give him security, and the
get
players
so they know what they're working towards.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen. That's my
Right, finish us off, mate. Talk to me about the Ukraine game, and then I'll let you go to bed.
The Ukraine game was one of the most.
You were working.
I was working. There was so I was doing the TalkSport updates and a little bit of FC Cymru, but mainly the TalkSport stuff. Actually, my company was doing a whole bloody load of things. We had a thing that the FAW got us to do, a thing called the Starting 11. So we live streamed from the side of the pitch. We had Abigail Davis on the side of the pitch, 2 presenters out and about around the stadiums. So we did that for about 40 minutes. All the technology held up, and it was before it went quite well actually, but that was fantastic. So fingers crossed we'll be doing that again. The stadium was absolutely bouncing. It was just wonderful. I was then did my TalkSport stuff. We had Dean Saunders in the studio. It was wonderful. And the Bale goal goes in. You think, this is it. This is wonderful. But we rode our luck, and it was tense and it was horrible. And then I watched the back. I did what you've done with the Belgium game. I properly watched it back, and I think people that said that we were outplayed by Ukraine, I sort of actually disagree with that. I think we very much set our stall out, and I actually think although Hennessy made a large number of saves, most of which were pretty regulation saves that you would expect him to make. The one that was sensational was that header where Leon, wow, that had big old Wayne Hennessy hand came out and pushed the ball wide. Fantastic. But we hit the post through Brennan Johnson. We had a great chance in the first half with Bale. I think put it over the bar. And we had another chance of Bale second half. Dan James. I think we had 4 or 5 really, really good chances that we should have buried.
Someone needs to get hold of Daniel James and do some finishing training, because he's got everything except finishing, one-on-one finishing.
Dan James has started every single one of Rob Page's games in charge.
I think he's exceptional.
Good reason for that. He is exceptional, and I think there should be more concentration on what he can do than what he can't do.
Indeed.
Anyway, go on. So yeah, the final whistle comes, and the final whistle was the best bit of the game. And then the stadium celebrations were just magnificent. And a huge amount of credit goes to the Welsh fans, because in the midst of all that glory, in the midst of all of that passion and that unbridling of 64 years of hurt, in all of that, they did the thunderclap with the Ukraine fans. They clapped the Ukraine fans. They clapped the Ukraine players. I thought it was the most wonderful
Didn't invade
show.
the pitch.
They didn't, but 4 or 5 did, and I thought, oh God! And then they just got. I think what they saw, because it happened right by me, and I saw the first one come on, and this steward absolutely nailed him, and I like to think that a few others looked at that and went, "Oh, no, thank you," but no, it like 90.99% of the stadium was just wonderful, and the reaction to the Ukraine players just showed so much class, and it was just fantastic to see them, and the way that they behaved themselves and reacted to it, and brought in the Ukraine players and fans, and given everything that they're going through, it meant a lot to me. Really meant a lot to me.
Absolutely, mate.
Now, I think so. Yeah,
first football game that I ever cried over as well.
Was it?
Yes. I had a strange conversation. So I watched it in my house in the end, and I watched it, and my father-in-law was watching it at his house, and we sort of just exchanged some text messages as we're going, and then it turned out that we'd basically both been watching it and kind of crying at the same time, but just I think I had I think I had like a podcast or something a bit later on, so I had to come home instead of watching it. I normally would have watched it with him, and it was just this weird thing. But like, yeah, that was the one that really got me, and I think probably because that was the most stressful game of football I've ever watched.
Yeah, it really was, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was like either we were missing the chances or Wayne Hennessy was saving something, and
saving a shot to the other end. Yeah,
Wayne Hennessy, another one, doesn't get enough credit. 104 caps for Wales.
Definitely. Yeah.
So there we go, mate. There was one question I was going to put to you, which Craig had asked earlier, and I started for later. He says, controversial, I know, but do you think our success is the development of the Premier League academies, because so many of the top Welsh youngsters have gone through it, and our team has changed from back in the day when it was full of second and third division, and under Bowie Gould, I think there was even a couple of Welsh League players in there as well at some point. So basically, the improvement of the Premier League academy system.
Yeah, I don't think that's controversial in the slightest, to be honest with you, Craig. I think you're absolutely spot on with that. I think I know my good friend at TalkSport, Adrian Durham, has caused a lot of controversy, I suppose, with his opinion that Wales should be thanking England for all their success. I don't think that at all. I think Adrian is on the wind up there, but
he knows what he's doing.
That's his job, and he does it so well as well. But yeah, I think we have. You look at a certain period of time over the last few years where Swansea players from their academy were filling up the age grade sides because of the success they had, and also in terms of the way that they've developed players and what have you. I think absolutely we are reaping the benefits of that, to be quite honest with you. Also, I think that the upsurge. So you see the Premier League and the type of players that they get in at the Premier League, and that level is unbelievable now, right? That level is unbelievable. But that also means that the Championship's gone, and the Championship is now at a level where we had second division players like bloody Mark Hazelwood and what have you in the past, and you think they are not international level boys, but they're decent pros in the English leagues, but they are not international level. But you can play in the Championship now and be an international level player. And the other thing,
like Premier League too, isn't it?
Yeah, and the other final thing on that is that actually our players are, because they're so well schooled now through the age groups and at their Premier League academies, that they're very, very technical players. So you can have somebody like Joe Morrell, who is playing in League One, but actually his style of football and the style of player that he is suits the international game more than it suits League One level. And so therefore, that's why you see them being able to go in, step in and perform at that level. And because they've stepped up through that Welsh way and that Welsh, standard level to level to level to level. So by the time they get to the international level, they call it caps, even at lower level. So when you speak to the likes of Richie Williams and to Matty Jones and all that kind of stuff, they talk about caps. And they want their players, by the time they hit the national side, the elite men's team, to have had 30 caps. 30 games at age grade levels, and that's coming through the 16s, coming through the 15s, 16s, 17s, now 18s, 19s, 21s, 30 caps, and then they jump into the senior scene. Some of them obviously accelerate beyond that. You've got the likes of Joe Morrell and Harry Wilson and all those guys who have come through the 21s, gone through that system, and already schooled in what it takes to be an international footballer. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting. And I think you're absolutely right there, Craig. I think it's bang on with that.
And I think someone said earlier in the chat that Ethan Ampadu is already on like 30 odd caps and he's only 21.
36 caps, I think he's on now. 35, 36 caps. So Craig has followed up. Hopefully we'll get some good Welsh academies in the future. Craig, that is the future. There is some. I know of some. There are some. Yeah, there are some very good academies, and some people doing, but need to be better. They need to be better.
Give it a few years.
And they need to be playing on good surfaces around the country. And the FAW We're really focusing on facilities at grassroots level. And that's how we become a self-sustaining football nation. Because you look at our population, it's not a huge population, but I think there's in Croatia their population of 4.3 million. So why aren't we producing players like Croatia do? They've got clubs there that don't have money like the Premier League clubs. They don't have them, but they have facilities and they have the ability to be able to produce a good number of international players. So we should be aiming to be like a Croatia, in my opinion.
Spot on, mate. Absolutely spot on. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all joining us as ever, as we've taken a little trip down memory lane. I told Laurence this was going to be an hour and a half at the most, so he's given us extra time. Mate, I do really appreciate you.
I could be here all night. I just wish I'd had a couple of beers while I was there. Drinking water.
You know what it's like, mate? You end up going off on a tangent and like we're talking about all different stuff, especially Welsh football. It's like the ultimate.
Can I do a quick plug for Welsh football fans?
Of course, I've linked all of it down below, but you.
That's sensational. Yeah, on Thursday, guys, I'm going to be in the audience drinking beer and eating pizza, but the guys will be doing a Welsh football fans live from our studios in Cardiff Bay on Thursday evening, 7:30, I think, and there'll be a band and some singing and some general chaos, which usually happens. So yeah. If you can come and watch that, guys, that'd be wonderful. Simon's going to come and join me for a beer there, aren't you? So it should be great.
Indeed. I will be there. So I'll see you on Thursday, mate. I appreciate your time as ever, taking you away from your family for a couple of hours.
Oh, it's all right.
We've
been on holiday together for the last week. We're sick of the sight of each other. It's fine.
Saving you, saving you, or saving them. I don't know. Which way around is it?
Yeah, to be fair, then.
As always, mate, it's a pleasure. I'll see you Thursday. And
thanks to everyone who's been watching along and chucking the comments in as well, guys. Thanks so much. Great to have had you along.
Legends. And also, just for anyone on YouTube, I think I'm on about 4,900 and something subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, please do. I want to try and hit 5,000. That would be nice. Nice little milestone. And tomorrow night, my story featuring rapper and mindset coach Jay Speaks, filmed at Eat Sleep Media. So there we go. Champion. It's a pleasure as always. See you soon, guys.
Bye now.